Let's jump right into it. Welcome to Woven Legends, Decoding the Meaty Embroidery. Today, we're unraveling a genuinely fascinating hidden history within the traditional hand embroidery of Manipur's Métis community. Now, if you're familiar with textile arts, you already know that fabric tells a story. But we aren't just looking at pretty patterns today. We're going to decode an entire secret language, a visual system that maps out mythology, environmental mastery, and some very strict social hierarchies, all hiding right there in plain sight on the cloth. Let's get started. It is not just fabric. It is the living archive of a people. Okay, let's really dive into this. When we talk about the Métis community, their embroidery is quite literally a living language. Where other cultures might have written volumes of history books or, carved their biggest legends into stone, the Métis encoded their entire worldview into thread. Every single loop, every color choice, and every geometric shape carries immense weight. Step 1, guardians of the home. Step 2, masters of the needle. Step 3, drivers of the economy. Before we can actually read this language, we've got to meet the architects behind it. The indigenous Métis women are the undisputed pillars of this highly evolved craft, and they juggle three massive societal roles. As guardians of the home, they shoulder the primary social burdens and maintain the structural integrity of their households. As masters of the needle, they preserve and advance a highly localized embroidery tradition that you literally will not find anywhere else on Earth. And finally, they are the drivers of the economy. They aren't just making the textiles, they are the sole marketers, actively finding commercial avenues for their goods and driving the wealth of their entire community. The sheer scale of what they do is honestly remarkable. These women are single-handedly sustaining their community's entire way of life. They are balancing everyday domestic survival with overarching economic growth, all while carrying the torch of this incredibly intricate artistic tradition. Without the highly skilled hands of Métis women, this living archive would simply cease to exist. So, where does this incredible artistry actually take place? Let's take a look at their canvas, the fanek, which is the traditional lower body wrap worn by Métis women. The main body of the garment is woven either in a single dark shade or with these beautiful three-color stripes. But notice that side border. It's intentionally left as a stark, plain black band. That deep black void is the absolute foundation. The complex embroidery is exclusively worked onto this black band only after the weaving process is totally complete, creating a really striking, brilliant contrast against the striped body of the garment. Romanian couching and satin stitches. These are precise needlework techniques, executed seamlessly to create a flawless, uniform surface. Turning that black canvas into a masterpiece requires an absolute mastery of technique. Now, these aren't your everyday sewing techniques. They're executed with such exacting precision that they create a perfectly flat surface. The stitching is finely chiseled, meticulously layered, and requires a level of patience and dexterity that takes years, if not a lifetime, to truly master. Now, what's really interesting about this is the incredible optical illusion these artisans pull off. The Métis embroiderers use untwisted silk. Working with untwisted silk is exceptionally difficult because it easily tangles and frays, but they use it for a very specific reason. It allows the thread to lie perfectly flat against the cloth. Because those precise Romanian and satin stitches are so finely chiseled and the silk lies so perfectly flat, it doesn't clash with the loom. To an untrained eye, the ornamentation actually appears to be a delicate woven decoration, as if it were made on the loom itself, rather than a needlework addition added way later. It's a breathtaking sleight of hand. Motif 1, Akoibe, the atonement of the serpent. Now that we understand the canvas and the technique, let's start translating the actual lexicon of Métis embroidery, beginning with one of the most foundational symbols. Notice how the overall pattern of the akoibe, which literally translates to circular, is one circle seamlessly joining the next in an infinite loop. Look at the center dot. That actually represents a bee hovering over a cluster of opening lotus buds flanked by 4 petals. On the periphery, you'll see half circles that mimic a traditional fishing hook. But the mythology behind it is where it gets super fascinating. The pattern traces its origin back to the legendary snake, Pakamba. According to myth, after the snake was slain by a goddess's husband, the killer tried to atone for his actions by meticulously copying the snake's scaly patterns into textile design. So every single time this is stitched, it's an echo of ancient mythical atonement. Motif 2, Hijai Mayak, a woodworker's legacy. Moving from the realm of myth, we transition into the realm of royal history with our second motif. The story behind the Hijai Mayak is wonderfully vivid. Way back around 950 AD, a master carpenter was carving a royal boat for the king. As he worked his tools, a long, graceful wood shaving fell from the timber. The flowing lines were so beautifully perfect that the king, absolutely captivated, commanded his embroiderers to replicate that exact shape onto the border of a ponic. Over the centuries, this historical narrative kind of shifted into a social one. The Hijamaic design became associated primarily with elders and later specifically with widows. Today, it remains the honor domain of older Meithei women. Motif 3, Tindogbi, translating the natural world. Our third motif shows us how the Métis artisans looked beyond the palace walls and straight into the vibrant forests around them. This is a perfect example of their environmental matrix. At the top, you have the Tindogbi, a highly stylized geometric satin stitch motif. But look closely at what it captures. It's the precise action of a silk caterpillar feeding on a castor leaf. Just below that is the maibung, where flowing lines of thread perfectly mimic the organic rings and textures of natural wood grain. And they don't just stop at insects and trees either. This environmental lexicon includes leaping tigers, prancing horses, butterflies, and elephants. They geometricize the wild, bringing the chaotic beauty of nature right into the strict discipline of their needlework. The Kumal, architecture of devotion. Okay, so we've looked at the individual symbols. Now let's step back and see what happens when these motifs are scaled up into complete, highly specialized garments. And this brilliantly illustrates the intersection of craft and strict cultural law. This is the kumal, the absolute pinnacle of Manipuri ceremonial dress. It's the Ras costume, worn exclusively by the characters of Radha and the gopis during the traditional Ras dance. Notice the foundation border at the bottom. It uses that circular akoibi design we discussed earlier. But here it utilizes a striking applique technique with red fabric meticulously layered over a bright yellow background. Above that is the illumination layer, featuring intricate abala or mirrorwork and sequins. Now, here is the ironclad rule. This specific abala mirror embroidery is strictly reserved for this costume alone. It is entirely absent from all other traditional garments. It is quite literally an architecture of pure devotion. The cloth of valor. In sharp contrast to the devotional beauty of the kumil, we have a garment that represents primal power. Also known as the Angami Nagashal, Samilami P literally translates to the warrior cloth of wild animals. The design constraints here are rigid. The background must be absolute black, divided by horizontal woven bands of bright color and densely embroidered with specific animal motifs. But what really matters is its social function. This wasn't something you could just go buy or make for yourself. This textile functioned as a royal military medal. It was exclusively bestowed by royalty upon distinguished warriors to recognize exceptional prowess in hunting and warfare. Owning one was, and absolutely remains, a profound symbol of status and bravery. The hierarchy of cloth. That brings us to a crucial realization about how all these threads combine to structure the ancient society. Let's walk through this rigid, four-tiered social pyramid. First, at the very top, we have the ningthupe, the king's cloth, reserved absolutely for the sovereign. Just below that is the saijamba, a long cloth bearing special, restricted embroidery, worn only by the trusted inner circle. The third tier is the zumfi, the honored war cloth, a special shawl worn in battle by a select few honored by the king. And finally, the firninamba, the rank plumes. These were small, delicately embroidered flags worn on warrior turbans, where the specific embroidery designated the soldier's exact military rank. Your proximity to power was explicitly dictated by the specific embroidery you were permitted to wear. So, the crucial point is this. The needles of the Meithei women literally governed the visual and social laws of the entire kingdom. They weren't just decorating fabric, they were maintaining the social order. Think about it. A single stitch out of place, or a restricted motif worn by the wrong person, would disrupt the entire hierarchy. The power wielded by these female artisans was absolutely foundational to the kingdom's operation. To wrap up this explainer, we bring it all back down to the elemental core, a single untwisted thread of silk. Through this one unbroken thread, passing through the dark, unyielding border of the fanak, Métis women have woven an entire societal language. They've documented the atonement of mythical serpents, mapped out the architecture of their forests, captured the radiant devotion of their dancers, and chronicled the valor of their fiercest warriors. This craftsmanship wildly transcends mere ornamentation. What does your clothing document about your society today? As we've seen, for the Métis, clothing is the living archive of a people, which leaves me with a question I want you to think about long after this explainer ends. When historians look back at the fabrics, the fast fashion, and the logos we wear right now, what does your clothing document about your society today? Thank you so much for joining me to decode these woven legends. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.